Welcome back to Neo Disney Fighting Evolution, a sequel to the morally tragic DFE storyline in my shared universe concept, Shareverse. I'm AJ, and this will be a rundown of some of the events that occurred in 2018 within the Disney alignment. As such, some terminology will be thrown around, so I do not only recommend part 1 of this storyline, but the last 2 videos of Disney Fighting Evolution, and even my introduction video to the channel, since it'll help clear some things that do occur in the video. With that out of the way, how was the Disney alignment looking at the start of 2018? The answer? Not a great place. The Disney alignment was not only recovering from the Civil War, but many of their classic in-house Astro Soul employees were dead. But as Mickey stated at the start of the year, he had to keep moving. Following the Toontown Incident, he frantically prepared his company to make sure it was ready for any intruding attack. The monster that mutated and twisted Toontown not only killed his wife, but infected and completely overwritten his dog's body and soul, even stealing the name Pluto for herself. While she was in Hell's prison for her immense crime against Astro Soul life, there was the possibility she would be revived sooner than anticipated, whether it be a short sentence or being broken out by her supposed acquaintance Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of destruction and violence that had blood ties to early 20th century entertainment rights. Also, apologies for mispronouncing her name in the last video. Hieroglyphics is clearly not a language I am fluent in. But if Pluto was drawing people to attack the Disney alignment when they were down, who knows who would be inspired to stir more chaos? And spoiler alert, Mystique is not one of them. Even though she appeared in the post-war filler arc at the start of the storyline, it was nearly there for filler purposes. Besides, Raven is the kind of person who would rather do things on her own instead of being bossed around by a bigger bad. She would not tolerate being barked down to by Pluto or remain blissfully ignorant to Sekhmet backstabbing anyone that she teams up with. Regardless, all 3 media alignments were in danger of this new threat, with the Disney alignment being the main target. Mickey spent no time to waste when deploying his troops, but he also made the decision to reach out to the other alignments in a time of crisis. However, the days of the media alignments working closely together were far gone. The Warner alignment had always been inclusive, usually having the Astro Souls stick with one another instead of lending out their hand unless they absolutely have to. So Mickey was not going to get any help from Bugs. And since 2013, the Viacom alignment was under new Astral management. And their new manager, Carmilla Kernstein, hated Mickey with every fiber in her body. And it didn't help him any favors once she heard about what happened in Toontown. So instead of looking outwards for help, Mickey's only option was to look inwards from his alignment. And he had a fair share of employees he could rely on. He had his 2 friends, which I'll go to in a minute, but he had Miss Lilith as the Astral co-owner of the company. She only focused on the Astral Soul products and content, and never anything for normal souls. But she was practically the leading force of original Disney in the Civil War. Add that with her Digimon family, her 2 close allies from the war, and they were seemingly strong enough to defend the parks from Pluto's return. However, despite being a former employee for the mouse, Gatomon never really perked Mickey up into being on friendlier terms, even if she went around in her Lilithmon form to keep up with the brand integrity of being the Astral co-owner. Over to Roger, he spent every day at Jessica's side, watching her gradually recover from her wounds during the Toontown Incident. But that didn't stop him from getting revenge. he already witnessed the streets of his hometown desolated and destroyed. He was not going to let the monster that caused the massacre of his people to walk free. And he never forgot what Sekhmet told him that day, that the media alignments would fall into one new alignment that would fall into ruin within Shareverse. For those reasons, he immediately joined Mickey's cause without a second thought. And on Kermit's end, while he didn't lose anything grand, he was indebted to Mickey as a friend, so he wasn't going to leave him hanging. With the four of them, Mickey decided to call themselves the Sovereigns of the Disney Alignment. Well, actually it was Miss Lilith, as a tongue-in-cheek reference to the Digimon Sovereigns. And also, by the way, she's a woman, but roll with it. However, conflict would brew shortly after, in the most inconspicuous place. Despite many content in the Disney alignment made in the 2010s was either from original or neo-Disney, there was technically a third group that fizzled out by the start of the Civil War. And this was actually in Kermit's neck of the woods. Kermit's role in the Disney alignment, alongside maintaining his entertainment property, was to look over the other acquired properties Disney owned. However, there was no need to look over Marvel or Lucasfilm, since those entertainment properties could stand on their own, for better or for worse. So Kermit only looked after the lesser utilized IPs, including his own. And while the Muppets did have a massive revival in 2011, it grinded to a halt once the war started. But there was also another entertainment property Disney was looking to bring back into the limelight, and it just so happened to be the other half of a project that was the last major thing the Muppets did in the 2000s. With the Land of Oz being an entertainment property that falls under the public domain, the three media alignments had created their own artificial astral souls based on the works of L. Frank Baum. The Warner alignment obviously has the 1939 film adaptation to work with, and the Viacom alignment sided with the fan-fiction turned musical Wicked as their representative. But even though they acquired the rights to the books since the 50s, Disney has never been able to make their versions of the Astro Souls from Oz. They tried a couple of times, like Return to Oz, but nothing stuck. But in 2013, Disney really tried giving it their full shot by making an origin story for the wizard himself, Oz the Great and Powerful. And Mickey was really committed to the project that he ordered the creation of two artificial astral souls from the film. These two would be used for marketing and press tours. But instead of choosing any of the heroes, he went with the villains. Evanora, the Wicked Witch of the East, and Theodora, the Wicked Witch of the West. But strangely enough, these iterations of the artificial astral souls were somewhat based off of Disney's two most popular villains. Remember, back in 2013, Mickey assumed Grimhilda and Maleficent died in the massacre, not knowing they were building the foundation of Neo-Disney under his nose. So he designed the two witches after them as a substitute for his most successful employees. And you can kinda see that in the film. Evanora turns into an old hag by the end of the movie, and even gives her sister a poison apple, just like Grimhilda. And the Wicked Witch is already similar to Maleficent in a lot of ways. They're both green sorceresses who wear black, and live in a dark castle with henchmen working for them. Hell, Oz beat Neo-Disney to the punch, with their villain having a tragic, sympathetic backstory before the Maleficent clone was created. But Mickey made it important for Theodora to not be identical to Maleficent in terms of agency. Despite being a high-ranking employee, Mickey never trusted Maleficent, expecting that she would betray the company at any given opportunity. And wow. So with Theodora's creation, she was intentionally made to be subservient and take direct orders from her sister, which not only makes an iconic villain like the Wicked Witch be portrayed as a pawn for an uninteresting villain, but did Mickey really want her to be sexy? Show a lot of cleavage? Whose idea was this? In any case, once the Civil War went underway, these two were immediately thrown to the side, not only since their inspirations were alive and now fighting one another, but Oz the Great and Powerful was both a critical and commercial flop. So Mickey had no desire to expand his alignment's vision of Oz. The two sisters watched the aftermath of the war from the sideline, and that's when Evanora decided to hatch a plan of her own, get back at Mickey for total negligence, created for the purpose of being a replacement which would eventually become disposable. Now doesn't that sound like a familiar motive, don't you think? In February 2018, Mickey was alerted with an urgent meeting from Hollywood Studios, which is somewhat of Kermit and Roger's shared branch in the company. Evanora sent a letter stating that she was tired of not doing anything and that Mickey should just terminate her and her sister, the same way he did with the artificial astral souls from Enchanted in 2007. But Mickey was smart enough to not take the bait, since the termination of the Enchanted astral souls was the leading cause of the Disney Princess Massacre, which would directly lead to the rise of Neo-Disney and the Civil War. So he sent Miss Lilith to negotiate and explain to the witches why their request was denied. But upon talking to the two, some slander was thrown at the Digimon, and that Evanora said that Miss Lilith was just Mickey's new dog on a leash. Ironic considering her rookie form. In fact, being the co-owner was the driving force of Miss Lilith's self-dependency. Back in 2000, she was the weakest link of the 02 Digidestined, mainly for not being at full power. The ability to go into her ultimate form was severed at the time, and she basically became Hawkmon's bottom bitch. Even when she fought on her own, more times than not, she had to resort to Nefertimon because that was all she had. It wasn't until she began to work with Fox Kids, where the president of the company, Turkina, saw her as a valuable employee. And only then was she able to display her true power. Once realizing she was infused with the Digi-Crystal, what is considered to be the beating heart of the digital world, she instantly took the first opportunity to do something with it. Eventually, she was able to get back at Mickey in the 2010s for kicking the Saban group out of the company in 2009. So having the impression that she achieved nothing really rubbed her the wrong way. Even though the Oz sisters weren't seen as a massive threat, yet they were likely to either side with Pluto or just be another danger to the alignment. So Kermit did keep a close eye on the two. Moving on to the end of the month, we have the next major plot point. Now, remember how the Warner alignment usually keeps to themselves instead of working alongside the other two media alignments? Sometimes they will actually branch out, but only to the Viacom alignment. And for this case, it was a death battle that pitted two best friends against one another. Warner alignment's Raven, not Marvel's Raven, DC's Raven, you know what I mean, and the Viacom alignment's Twilight Sparkle, which by 2018 was still the ruler of the independent country/kingdom in the sky, Equestria. Now, the two had been best friends since the start of the decade, as they have a lot of things in common. But this death battle was something that they requested themselves, to see which one was the stronger friend. So, whoever died, neither was going to hold a grudge for the other. And so, when Raven showed no mercy killing her friend, that was that. However, what was not anticipated was Twilight being requested to spend her afterlife sentence in Hell's prison for 24 hours. But the requester was unknown. During her time, Twilight was confused on who would she spending the afterlife sentence with, but nobody approached her. All in all, it was a confusing redirection, and after 24 hours after her death, she was revived and went back to ruling Equestria. But little did Twilight know that her requester was in Hell's Prison and was secretly siphoning her magic and harvesting it for herself. Flash forward to May. The Disney alignment was somewhat fully recovered from the damages of the final battle of the Civil War. Solo was now in theaters, and unfortunately, people were still bummed of The Last Jedi, and ultimately Solo didn't make as money as Disney hoped it would make. But hey, on the bright side, Infinity War, that made a lot of money. So in general, this was a random slow day in the middle of the month. That was until an unexpected attack from Oz. While Evanora had a frail body, she did use her sorcery to summon a horde of flying monkeys. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, flying baboons. Yeah, I don't know why they picked another primate species. And to no one's surprise, she sicked her sister to cause some attacks around Hollywood studios. But upon this fight, only then did Pluto make her attack. She revived herself and began to attack Magic Kingdom. The Sovereigns made a split. Mickey and Roger would handle Pluto, and Miss Lilith and Kermit for Oz. For their first battle working under one army, the former Neo and original Disney soldiers worked in sync when fighting the flying baboons. But this was Mickey's first attempt to prove people that he had changed, making sure none of his employees would be fatally killed during Pluto's attack. For Miss Lilith, she could not shake the words that were stuck in her head from Evanora during their meeting, though here she was hoping to prove her wrong by fighting Theodora head-on. But with Pluto, she surprised Mickey with a new trick. She was the one to not only request Twilight to the afterlife, but she even copied her magic. Recall that the parasite Pluto did model herself off of Jessica, who is a Trinity alignment Astro Soul, but she could only take parts from the Disney alignment, since her host was from the same alignment. But with Twilight being from the Viacom alignment, she used her influence to take parts from Twilight while she was serving her death battle sentence. As such, she was able to invoke her own copies of equestrian soldiers, though these were Dark Shadow clones, making her easily plow through both Roger and Mickey and any other soldiers that came after her. Although strangely, Pluto did not transform into either of her monster forms. Nobody knew why, but trying to come up with theories was not here or now. However, it was apparent that Pluto was not working with the witches from Oz, nor was Sekhmet present in this attack. Regardless, Miss Lilith continued to fight Theodora until eventually her sister had to call her back alongside the remaining few soldiers of the baboons. In addition, Mickey and Roger combined both of their strengths in magic and gunfire to try to take out Pluto. While it was a really tough battle and there were some injuries but no fatalities, Pluto was able to succumb to death once more. The random invasion was prevented in an acceptable first battle for the Disney United Army. However, some cracks in the relationships were starting to form, mainly with the two co-owners. Following the fight, the Sovereigns arranged a private meeting with one another, as they tried to sketch out a game plan for the foreseeable future. They began to wonder what to do now, with Pluto becoming potentially a reoccurring threat to the company. They also tried to theorize why she did not use any of her monster forms, and the sudden rise of attacks that were directed solely at the Disney alignment by Oz. They concluded with the belief that the aftershock of the Toontown Incident made several groups from the media alignments to go after the Disney alignment as an enemy. Considering so much death and carnage happened in that incident, it painted Disney as a threat. A threat to not only normal souls for quote-unquote ruining their beloved franchises, but the fact that they could easily throw any and all of their employees into the meat grinder for the sake of money. Not only that, but with these outside threats, Pluto could use them as ingredients to synthesize, siphon, and create even more dangerous spells, powers, and transformations. Lord knows if there was a Digimon incident that occurred in the Disney alignment, Pluto could siphon that energy and use it for herself to become an unstoppable force. The Sovereign's #1 priority was if they keep the alignment safe, Pluto's looming power would not increase. However, the ultimate goal was to eradicate the parasite Pluto's soul so that way she could stop being revived. Although no one had the potential theory on how they could actually eradicate her. At this meeting, Mickey even considered reaching out to the aesthetic alignments to help rebuild Disney's trust. But again, it was all just spitballing ideas. The four made an agreement to do as much as they can to maintain Disney's prominent stance in Shareverse. And this is a good enough point to leave the video on. I wanted to discuss more things that occur later in 2018, but truthfully, I'm still ironing the prominent plot points that could happen in the storyline. Although I can assure you, that will be the only rough spot in reorganizing the Neo-Disney Fighting Evolution storyline, as the events in 2019 are a lot more fleshed out and cemented. With that being said, if you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Until then, I'm AJ, and I'll see you all in the next one.